Hello and welcome to Pardon the Interception, Week 11 with your hosts Lee Wood.
You got Conrad Williams. I'm back, guys. Hi.
And Nick Taylor, who's not in a room of boxes.
We allowed him out just for the playoffs. So let's take a look at what's been going on in Gridiron this past game week. So starting off with the GFL, we have the Gunslingers at the Mustangs. Conrad, what can you tell us about this game?
Yeah, it's playoff time. The summer has arrived while I've been away at least, and now it's absolutely toasty. And for those who are still in the playoffs, there's plenty of hot action, including this game between the Gunslingers and the Mustangs. Everyone likes an overtime game, always a close contest in those situations. We've talked a bit about both these teams at various stages through the season. This is Theo Whittingham's the young upcoming coach who's making a mark on the league. This is obviously a huge battle to get all the way to a fifth quarter. You would feel maybe that the Mustangs had the edge of it, on balance during the course of the game. But the Gunslingers also put together some big plays. Their quarterback was able to put in a couple of touchdowns to counteract the fact that he was sacked and intercepted a few times. And at the end of the day, what it came down to is, a late in the game turnover. But that was enough to get the Gunslingers over the line. Just a really long, hard-fought battle.
Yeah, I think everyone does love an overtime game except for the losing coach. I would like to potentially see the new NFL overtime rule brought in, but I don't think it would be a nice to have, but I think it would be a pain in the butt to code.
Yeah, you don't want to be on the wrong side of that coin flip because you're always, of course, worried about that they might just end the game immediately. But yeah, it's definitely a great one to watch. We'll look forward to the divisionals now.
Nick, anything to add?
No, just a great game, and two teams that have performed very well this season. Gunslingers got to be pretty happy with that win because the Mustangs have looked pretty consistent throughout the season.
Okay, then the next game we've got to look at is the Stratford Steelers at the Wexford Rockets. Let's bring this one across, assuming my mouse wants to behave. No, you don't. Yep.
Two more great teams. There aren't really any bad teams at this stage of the proceedings once you've got into the wildcards. I kind of just going into it based on, coach pedigree and, Mark Spencer's got a history of doing very well in the GFL. Without looking too deeply into it, I might have thought the Steelers would have the edge in this one. But, pretty clearly on the day, it was definitely the Rockets' day and their performance, was very solid. I think ultimately it wasn't pure offensive football here. They did put up 37 points, but it wasn't in kind of like a sort of steadily grinding kind of way. It was a bit patchy. You can look at the quarterback ratings and see that like the passing games were not on fire. But ultimately their efficiency when they had the chance, they took the chance. They that third quarter of 16 points was definitely enough to give them that pretty convincing win overall.
Yeah, and you can see that the Steelers really did struggle to pass the ball with only a 33.3% passing average.
Am I right in saying this is the one that was played in week 10 and the Rockets injured the Steelers wide receiver or something? Is that correct?
Yeah. I've forgotten about the week 10 bit, but yeah, the injured receiver obviously didn't help the Steelers as much. And so it's probably a bit of well-timed hatchet play to get through this one.
Okay. Then let's move on to look at the second round of the playoffs. So the first game we're going to look at is the Tuscany Raiders at the Rind Wraiths. So going on form, not looking at anything here apart from the series and knowing Coach Russell a little bit. Wraiths to win by who cares?
The Master and the Apprentice, the Wraiths 11, the Raiders 0. The Wraiths under Coach Russell have 10 Super Bowl rings to the Raiders 1. So you would definitely think that the Raiders are the underdog here. But, they've also done it very well over the course of the season. Never say never. There could still be a surprise here, even though Coach Russell is, the undisputed king of the playoffs in Gridiron.
89% coach win percentage with 358 wins and 44 losses. That's insane.
Yep.
But the Tuscany Raiders do have the number one overall offense against the 13th defense. We could see an upset here, but Wraiths at home, I wouldn't want to bet against it. And what does the spread say? The spread gives it to the Wraiths by 1. This could be a close game.
You never know, the weather might play a factor. I see it's going to be frozen and windy, so that could lead to some unexpected incompletions or turnovers. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the Raiders are more of a run-first team, so they can probably handle a bit of wind, but should be a good one.
The ice will affect the running game, though.
You can slip and fall, can't you?
Yes. Nick, anything to add?
Yeah, nice. It's an interesting matchup with the running game of the Raiders and the passing game, mostly. Sort of a bit more of a passing game from the Wraiths. Maybe they've got a bit more about them. Wraiths at home always helps to be at home. But I don't know, something saying Raiders to me, but I know a lot less about these teams than you guys. So. Yeah.
Okay, then moving on to the second game to look at, we've got the Chasm City Circle at the Ventura Wildcats.
Yeah, interesting one. The Circle spent a very, very long time in the wilderness in the GFL, and Coach Carl Waldenberg had many seasons of not really going anywhere, but kind of exploded back onto the scene relatively recently in the last sort of, 5 seasons or so, has had much more success. And as you can see, he's gone 9-1 this season. And he's picked, and along the way in his most recent success, he's had 2 Super Bowl rings as well. So he's got the ring advantage over Steve Abrams' Wildcats. It's again, both of these ones that we've highlighted are pretty mouth-watering matchups in terms of the quality of the teams so far this season. You can see defensively both very effective, offensively both also pretty effective. So yeah, definitely looking forward to this one with interest.
Okay, Nick, anything to add?
Yeah, no, this should be two very strong defenses here. It might well come down to the Circle's rushing game against the likely 3-3 defense of the Wildcats, and that'll be an interesting one to watch.
The biggest thing for me here is you've got the Wildcats being with a very unusual position of being the number 1 rated defense on both pass and rush. That's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, on to the Atlantic. So first game we've got to look at, we're going to hand over to Coach Conrad Williams to talk through his game with the Blues.
Yeah, well, I used to hate wildcards because I had lost so many in a row, but it's starting to turn around a bit now. And yeah, it's always good to get a wildcard win. It's a big objective for the season for us. I think we wanted to turn things back around against the Blues after they beat us pretty soundly earlier on in the season. And to be honest, there wasn't that much different about this game compared to the previous one. I think just we had the advantage. We had one sort of +1 on the turnover differential was a pretty big difference. None of our offense was particularly impressive. Fortunately, we got a couple of interceptions. I think that did make quite a big difference. And we probably did slightly better against Bertelli than we did the first time round. So kept his quarterback rating down a bit and didn't let him. I don't think he found the end zone with any passes. So that it was close at the end of the day. It was a close game. But yes, very very pleasing to come away with the win. Sets up a good fun one for next week.
Okay. I was a little bit surprised by the scoreline. I thought the Blues at home, given the previous game, I thought the Blues were going to win just as home field advantage can be such a huge difference at the minute. But no, it was a solid win. Nothing more for me to add. Nick?
Yeah, like the Blues have come on strong later on in the season, and as Conrad alluded to, the game early on in the season looked pretty close. I think tweaking a few things here and there can make a big difference, and probably the fact that the Redcoats have a bit more of an established run game has helped them out here, because that's got them an extra few yards. But overall, a very defensive game, and the Redcoats have come out on top on that front.
Okay, and then the second game we have to look at is the Brighton and Hove Islanders at the Wychville Magpies. Nick, you know these teams better than I, so why don't you lead?
Yeah, so we've got two teams that are in my division. They took the slots this season. Brighton have been a very, very strong short zone passing team. Serrano is part in he's been very strong throughout the season, and the games, the fact that these two have played each other this season, and the divisions being close, probably has helped the Magpies a little bit more than it normally would. Brighton have obviously taken a little bit of an advantage by pushing a little bit more of a running game this game, and this game was expected to be tight from what I could see. Rob is always in every game. It's very rare that Brighton are blown off the park, which is huge, and this is why this game has gone to overtime. The home field advantage from the Magpies is probably just about done it. And yeah, like two impressive teams, and I think this really cements the Magpies as a strong contender in this playoff, because I think the Islanders really are quite high up there this season.
Z?
Yeah, great game again. Overtime, of course, close. I like the fact, and I think I mentioned this in the comments, that they didn't pass very much on the Magpies, but every single pass they attempted, they managed to get complete. So 3 from Grimshaw, 2 from Lowe, all 100% complete. So definitely the play action was working.
And that's going to be key in close games like this, and winning with a field goal in overtime. It doesn't matter how many points you win by and which quarter you win in. A win gets you through to the next round. Then looking forward to next week, we'll start off with the big hitter in this particular group, at least, the Redcoats at the Mariners. Nick, let's start off with you, and then me and Conrad will weigh in.
Two completely unknown coaches here. I don't really know how they both got here. They've got very lucky throughout the season, I feel. Oh, sorry, no, you guys. This one should be really interesting. Throughout the season, everyone's questioned how good the Mariners really are. Lee predicted himself to win the bowl this season right from the start, and was it 9-1 this season? Probably a softer schedule than the Redcoats have had. The Redcoats started off slow. I would say they were unlucky at the start of the season. They didn't get the run of the green, and I think this game is going to be a great game. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the offense of this Long Beach Mariners team, which has performed throughout the season, comes up against, as we saw, the Redcoats team that pretty much stopped the Blues from doing very much last week. So yeah, I'll hand it back over to you guys, but I'm not going to predict any winners. You guys can have a bit of a talk about that.
The biggest thing from my side, looking at the stats, is on paper there is a stronger offense and a slightly stronger defense, but from Conrad's team, I think I can compensate for those. Yes, I did have an easier schedule this year. I think the decision maker for me is going to be that I've managed to generate double the amount of takeaways. So this could be a game that is determined by who turns over the ball, the baller more. And I'm liking my home field advantage. I think I can win this game, but the odd markers have me with a spread of 4. I think that's about fair. And think it's going to be a very tight game. Conrad?
Yeah, you're right. Of course, turnovers are always a big thing. It's a funny one. I still don't really know where we're at this stage because until we beat the Blues, we hadn't really beaten anyone good. So it was, it's still a bit of a mystery to me exactly how good the Redcoats are compared to other teams. And yeah, certainly be looking forward to this test. Home field obviously is a big thing, but we've come out and beaten teams away before, and that will be the test here. And I think defensively we match up well, but the issue is that I'm not sure how much offense we can generate because that number 2 league-wide number 2 offense is very misleading because we don't actually put up that much on people. It's the where we got a lot of our yards was against rubbish basically. We got 2 games against the Meerkats to help our yardage out.
I think the biggest question is also going to be how much of a deal having a C injuries going to be, because looking at your team sheets, he's just started right corner.
Yeah, 20%, which is not helpful. As you're I'm going to have to deal with some deep passing, and having 20% of his levels not ideal. Could be worse. Could have been a left tackle like it was in week 2 for us. So it makes a difference. And
you don't need a left tackle to pass short.
So we'll see what the wins bring. I think turnovers will be important, and looking forward to it.
Okay, and then the second game we've got to look at is the Magpies at the Stallions. An interesting game here that I think, given Aaron 2 weeks to game plan for any game, I think he's going to win. I think it could be a close game. I mean, the odds spread has the Stallions with a 20-point spread, but knowing Aaron as well as I do from the Delta as well, give him 2 weeks to look at something, and that's going to be his game plan's going to be completely on point and 100% focused. So unfortunately, I see the Magpies turning up and giving him a game, but I honestly don't see the Magpies winning the game.
Yeah, Stallions, I mean, of course, are heavy favourites here. Aaron's gone 10-0 with the number 1 defence, despite, giving away the ball 19 times. He's still managed to go 10-0. So, he's obviously goes into this one as the favourite. You'd expect his defence to be able to stop the rush game of the Magpies and for it not to be close and that 20-point spread to be not too inaccurate. So anything else, I think, is an upset. So we'll see if Coach Wallace can produce something of an upset.
Nick?
Yeah, as you both said, Stallions have been one of the 2 standout, real standout teams in the CFC. Magpies, it took us a while to work out where they are or where they were this season, and it says 8-2. They didn't really turn up for week 10 because they didn't need to, which is fair enough. But 1 loss on the season essentially. Magpies probably are pretty decent. I can't remember whether the Stallions played. I think they played the Islanders this season, and that game was fairly close. Memory serves me correctly, but if that is the case, then maybe the Magpies can do something. But I think the Stallions at home are just going to be too difficult for most teams to beat. They're just so strong at home that I can't really see past the Stallions. But I think if anyone's going to do it, then the Magpies are probably one of the best teams equipped to try and do it.
Okay. Then moving on to the next league, we have the Mosquito Coast Maroons at the Seattle Generals. Nick?
Yeah, so here we are at the Big Sky, and there's a lot of points. Big Sky, it was a great game, really. The Generals have a lot to have Hooker to thank a lot. With 304 rushing yards, he's done the business, and that second half they put on the performance to bring themselves back into the game and win this game. an interesting one is there's no turnovers on either side of for this game. I found that was quite an interesting one. Maybe the defenses aren't quite there, which might be something to look out for in the next week or two. But yeah, a great game, and I think it's a fantastic win for the Generals, this one.
Z?
No turnovers at all, which is so clean and relatively unexpected for this season, where a lot of people have been complaining that turnovers seem to be through the roof. Yeah, and of course the result of that is a lot of points on the board because no one was turning it over. Yeah, it's two strong teams, a bit of a pass v rush kind of game. Seattle very grindy. Hooker, as Nick said, did incredibly well. 4 touchdowns. You know, you'd be surprised to lose in that situation.
Okay. Then moving on to the next game, we've got the Port Royal Buccaneers at the swarming Giant Hornets. So what we can see here is Tripson trying to run and Tripson passing, receiving pretty well, but falling up a little bit short, with the Buccaneers taking what to me is maybe a little bit of an upset game, especially with so many passing yards being put on by the Hornets. But the running game of the Buccaneers managing to pull out a win here. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the first games I checked out in the other leagues once the games were in, and I was really interested to see how the Buccaneers did in this game. We thought they were on a bit of a downswing, and we thought Davies was on a bit of a downswing, and you know, we've been talking about Tripson most of the season, and he's got quite a few receiving yards, but nowhere near as many receiving yards as Davies has rushing yards in this game, and he's made the real difference here. With nearly 500 rushing yards in this game, the Hornets just weren't able to stop him, and that's what's done for them here. Impressive season from the Hornets, but yeah, Davies has done the business here.
A ground and pound there from the Buccaneers. They have absolutely leveled in terms of like having this brutal give the rock to Davies and just let him smash it. 5 touchdowns, 8.5 yards a carry, an absurd 56 carries. The guy's just like indestructible. But poor Tripson did very well again, but he couldn't carry the team by himself. And of course, the 4 turnovers, vital difference to have a sort of -4 turnover ratio. And actually, you can say the Hornets did pretty well to only lose by 3 with a horrific turnover ratio like that.
The other crazy thing is, like, Davies has 56 carries and 0 fumbles.
Yeah, that's insane.
Nuts.
Okay, moving on to look at next week's games. We have the Washington Stormers at the Beverly Bay Packers. Nick, what brought your eye to this?
Yeah, so the Packers have looked very good this season. Stormers are well up there, as you can see, 2nd overall in offense and 5th overall in defense. This looks like it should be a bit of a defensive battle, with the Packers being number 1 defense in league. Yeah, it looks like a game that should be pretty close, which is what we like to see. We like to see close games and see how 2 teams like this really face off. You've got the 4th best passing offense against the 2nd best, against the 5th best passing defense, and the number 1 rush defense against the number 5 rush offense. So, yeah, it's going to come down to who takes advantage of those situations, and it should be a really close one and a really interesting one to watch.
Okay, Z?
Yeah, nothing to add to that. I think that's a pretty good description. It's two great teams and should be a good game.
And a very close spread as well, just to match everything that Nick said. And the second game we've got to look at is the Mount Dora Massive at the St. Lawrence Shadows. Nick, what brought your eye to this?
So these are 2 teams we have covered throughout the season. The Massive are the team that beat the Buccaneers twice. Made us start wondering whether the Buccaneers were on a bit of a downswing, and they've come through their playoff game quite well. So the Massive should be in a good position to at least make a good go of it. And the Shadows have sort of the second half of the season they really came to light. All right, they 14th overall offense, 12th overall defense. Doesn't necessarily say a lot, but you've got the 4th best rusher in the league, and it's going to come down to whether the Massive can stop that. And that's a really interesting one because they managed to stop Davies. So maybe they have the right players to do that. And I think this game, two teams that are pretty good, pretty even level, should create quite a good game.
Yeah, I think it looks like the Shadows are quite a good balanced offense in that they're making use of pass and rush. From memory, I think the Massive had some games where their defense really dominated the opposition. So actually, I think the defense of the Massive is possibly even better than their 4th ranking suggests. So that'll be interesting about, can they stop the Shadows in all zones? Maybe they can and get the win that way. If they can't, of course, then they won't.
Okay. And moving on to the Continental. First game we've got to look at is the Houston Bullets at the Highland Renegades. So a close game here that was anyone's to play for up until the final whistle went, but the Renegades managing to squeak out a win. Which, looking at the yardage and time of possession, I'm surprised at how close the scoreline is, but in playoff football, as we've said before and we'll say again, it's not the quality of the win that counts, it's just getting the win. 24 first downs against 6, but still only managing to put up 18 points. Does this show that there's some problems in the Renegades going forward, or is this just a blip?
Feels like that Houston basically needed to just hoof the ball out and get a breakaway to have any chance of actually scoring. And of course they did that twice, so they got 14 points on the board, whereas the Renegades were limited to field goals, it looks like. Or maybe they missed an extra point somewhere along the way. But you feel like they were kind of dominating the Bullets in this one in terms of not really letting them have much on the offensive side. So, nearly very unfortunate, but I suppose the Bullets defense deserves credit here as well, because they forced some turnovers and didn't give up anything easily and really kept it close until the end.
Yeah, I think that's the point, is the Bullets defense have kept this game close. 4 turnovers to 1. You've got 3 interceptions, 3 fumbles, 2. They've managed to recover 2 of them, but that makes quite a big difference, as you can see on the score sheet. It's kept them in the game, and an impressive passing performance bar those interceptions from the Renegades. So it'd be interesting to see where they end up going forward. They just had too much for those Houston for that Houston defense. I think they couldn't quite stop them enough times, even if they did keep them to field goals.
Okay. And then the second game we've got to look at is the Miami Destruction at the Peckham Trojans. So, closest game here with the yardage and possession looking as though the Destruction possibly should have pipped this game, but coach Dan managing to get a convincing win at home here and progressing his team to the next round, perhaps due to a slightly more balanced offense. The Destruction seem to be heavily reliant on the pass, whereas the Trojans seem to have a little nice bit of a mix. Turnover battle fairly flat. A competitive playoff game, but unfortunately only one team can progress.
Yeah, I think the Destruction were really hampered by the fact that they had 27 carries for their running back, but just could not get anything going. And you'd have to think, based on the MVP, that defensive tackle Striper had a fair bit to do with that and just stopping their run game to a significant extent. Meanwhile, the Trojans managed to get some pretty big breakaways on their rush plays. So with only 16 carries, they knocked out at least one massive breakaway. You can see the long of 83 there. So they got the big breaks, and they also managed to hold down the line of scrimmage with Striper.
Yeah, it looks like that is the case. I mean, the Trojans quarterback has struggled quite a bit in this game, but but that rushing breakaway makes a big difference, and being able to stop the destruction when required has also made quite a big difference. As alluded to before, the mixed offense really helps here. Just gives you more chance of those things happening, and one long pass and one long rush makes for a couple of touchdowns, and that's tough to deal with.
It also helps keeps a defense honest when they are game planning. If they have to look after a passing zone and a rushing zone, and you're going to have a few plays that go into the other zones as well. But if you can go all out against the pass and just give up on the run and not get punished for it, then that's going to be a bad thing for the offensive team there. Then moving to look at the next round of the playoffs in the Continental, we've got the Golden State Monarchs at the Black Mountain Thunderbirds to look at first. Black Mountain Thunderbirds are a team that have stuck in my mind for the Continental for years and years and years. And see the Monarchs come in as the away team with the number 1 overall offense and the number 2 defense, and the Thunderbirds are a lot lower in those ratings, despite going 10-0 this season, and they don't have any skill players ranked in the top 10 either. I'm expecting to see an away win upset here, and even the odd markers have them at 11 points. I'm kind of surprised how Coach Stevenson went to 10-0 with nothing in the top 10 or top 5 for any of the players or stats here. And I'm thinking this could be the end of the road for the Thunderbirds in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Stevenson's a wily customer and probably did some pretty astute game planning to get this far. I mean, if you look at his career record, you can see that he's certainly achieved a lot in his time. Yeah, I wouldn't put it past him to have the solution again to crack the Monarchs. But interesting thing I saw on this one in the preview is if you look at Jensen, he for the Monarchs in sacks, he's 4th in the sacks list for the season, but he's got 31. So there must be 3 players in the Continental who've got more than 31 sacks this season, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that is pretty incredible. Yeah. Yeah, the Thunderbirds are impressive. Am I right in thinking they're the team that haven't lost in the regular season for quite a few seasons? And
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So clearly, Johnny Stevenson knows what he's doing in those regular season games. I'm not brushed up on their playoff record, unfortunately, but if you have a record like that where you know how to win, then I think you don't necessarily need the best players to win. If you've got all of the tools to deal with all of the different types of offense you're going to face, then maybe that's what you need. You might not look like the best team overall, but you might have just the best tools to equip yourself in the right situations. And I think the Thunderbirds could be that team. They could be the team that has the right tools to stop the Monarchs.
Okay, then moving on to the second playoff game, we've got the Highland Renegades at the Arctic Badgers.
Everyone loves watch, you say?
That is indeed a Stromwatch game. Nick, why don't you lead us through talking about the home of Strom?
Well, the Badgers, obviously, we've gone on about Stromwatch, but and he's got his fair few yards this season. We've all enjoyed that. But Anguta is the real running back in this Badgers team. 2,600 rushing yards. I mean, the Badgers have over 4,000 rushing yards this season, which is quite absurd. And it really is the Renegades. That's what they've got to focus on. Can they stop Anguta and Strom? And so far this season, no one's been able to stop them. They've just been so impressive in everything they've done. Do the Renegades have a chance? Well, they've got their own running back, I think, to give it a go. But I don't know. Like when you're coming up against a running back as good as Anguta, I think you're really just going to struggle, especially with him being at home. and I can't really see past a Badgers win in this one.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I think I'd come ultimately to the same position of saying that they are just going to steamroll behind that running back. I mean, Ken Melvin is one of the dukes of the Continental and has over 200 wins. So again, he definitely knows what he's doing. But I think that it's going to take more than just a bit of good game knowledge to stop Anguta. He is just going to smash you. So he might make a little dent in his yardage, but unless he starts fumbling to Strom-like levels, I think the Badgers will just run away with it.
You can put 14 players in the box, right?
I mean, this is a common complaint, right? A common gridiron complaint that you can't overplan to take a player out of the game. So, like, there are lots of extreme stances you can do, and you can do 4-4 and this kind of thing. But sometimes people want to say, but what I would do in this situation is, knowing how good he is, I would put like 8 men in the box. But you can't really do that.
It's going to be an interesting game. I think the Badgers should win, but I think it's going to be closer than some people think. I think it's going to be closer than the odds state. The odds have it with the Badgers by 8. I think it could be a single score or less. I think it's going to be a field goal in this game. And then on to the Delta. First game to look at is the Corpus Christi Cougars at the La Jolla Lone Stars. It seems that Coach Sanford's getting a lot of discussion this week. What I can say about this game is defense. What is that? We have 98 points scored in this game, with Corpus Christi very, very nearly managing to pull off an upset here. The teams did what the teams want to do. Bro just had a field day. Vector was kept in check a little more than usual, but if you cannot deal with Bro, you cannot deal with the rushing game of La Jolla, you're not going to have a good day out. And both Bro and Vector averaging over 10 yards a carry is not a good place to be. Plaudits to the Hoff though for managing to put up 41 points here.
I think the universe has been a bit destabilized by the fact that the Cougars are not, in fact, knocking out the Venom. So they've been knocked out themselves.
That's the big thing, that it's the Lone Stars rather than the Venom. Yeah, as we mentioned Aaron before, like the Stallions in the A have been very impressive this season, and the Lone Stars are, let's say, just as good, or look just as good in the D. They've run almost literally all over this Cougars team for 400 yards. It's not right. It's not to Davies level, but it's still very impressive. Both running backs are over 10 yards on average is quite absurd. And if that happens to you, I think it's going to be a very tough one to win. And yeah, the Lone Stars are looking good at the start of this playoffs.
Okay, then the second game we've got to look at is the York Centurions at the Jorvik Jets in the Battle for York. Old York, New York, which is the best? And in this game, York have had a rebuild, coming out of a rebuild at the minute, and they're doing incredibly well, but they couldn't shut down my running back in Gold. I got a decent performance out of my quarterback as well. Managed to pull out a win, which I was expecting this game to be closer than it was, as I don't have the best team I've ever had. But managing to pull out a win here and progress to lose to Frome next week is definitely an accomplishment here. The Centurions are going to be a team to watch if they can get into week 11, 2 seasons after a rebuild. They're really going to be a team to watch.
Yeah, you're keeping yourself busy, Lee, having to do 2 divisionals.
Yes, and I have game plan for both of them, and I'm not expecting to win the one in the Delta at all.
Some would call that greedy, just stealing all of the playoff games like that. Yeah, good win for the Jets here. Mostly on the back of running back Gold, as you mentioned, Centurions on a little bit of a rebuild. But if you coming through that rebuild season and you're making the playoffs, that's got to be good for the future. So
yeah. Then looking forward to this week's games. Got to have a look at La Jolla and the Hammer Sharks, as this is possibly the game of the. This is the game of the playoffs, I think. On paper, La Jolla have won practically every outing they've had, but Michael Smith of the Hammer Sharks has been building, made some big trades in the off-season, getting rid of some of his older players, but has proved that he still has a very, very shored-up team. And I think home field advantage is going to be an interesting one here. Michael has the number 1 rated defense, and he is rated number 3 against the rush. If he can contain Vector and Bro rushing, whilst not giving up every single passing yard, he very well could knock La Jolla out in this round of the playoffs, which would be a little bit of an upset, but not a huge unexpected one. The Hammer Sharks are favourites here, but I think going into every single year in the Delta, people always expect to see La Jolla in the bowl.
Yeah, we can't let Aaron have all the bowls. So, but yeah, I don't know enough about the matchup really to have a strong view. But you would think that number 1 defense could do some work here.
That's pretty much going to be the key, I think, is how strong the Russian defense is.
Yeah, it's going to come down to that. And by the looks of it, is it Vector? Vector's thrown the ball away a few times to some opposing cornerbacks, and that looks like a potential leak there for the Lone Stars if he decides to throw some more interceptions. Then maybe that could be the difference in this game as well, because that's quite a few interceptions.
Yeah. Vector's an unusual QST quarterback. It's something like a 40-40-20 or something like that. He's not like a 50-60 strong or technique guy.
Yeah, so if he's pushed into throwing the ball a little bit more than running with it, then that could cause a few issues for the Lone Stars, I reckon.
Then the second game to look at in the Delta is the Wally Warriors at the Sacramento Robber Barons. So the Robber Barons, I believe I've waxed lyrical about them an awful lot. As you can see, they've got the number 1 overall offense, despite having the 31st rushing offense. There's a team that have rushed for less than 48 yards this year. Wally's stats are really perverse here because their best offensive weapon is actually their returner. Their kick returners averaging 50 yards a kickoff return, which is just insane. So they're operating on a much shorter field than any other team. They've also got a strong secondary as they convincingly beat the Venom 2 weeks in a row. The odd markers do have the Robber Barons with a spread of 6. The Robber Barons pass it deep. That's about it. Glenn has said that he can attack the short zone as well. This is going to be one down to the game planning. If Glenn can get the short zone hit slightly more than the deep zone, and Jonathan's prepped for mainly a deep zone attack, then the Barons will win. If Jonathan manages to match his defense up to the passing attack that Glenn's putting out this week, then Wally could win, especially with that return game being so explosive as well. Nancy?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've always historically tremendously undervalued returners, and it's come to bite me a few times as I just get outclassed on special teams in pretty much every match. And that can make a big difference. Can it make enough of a difference to beat Brosius? No, not by itself. You know, it won't win the game exclusively with special teams. They will need to be able to convincingly do some damage to the pass game and get some picks to win this one.
Yeah, I agree. It's down to Brosius and whether they can find a way to stop him at all. It looks pretty difficult based on his numbers. Like nearly 5,000 passing yards is quite frankly absurd. And Casey with over 2,000 receiving yards is quite the feat as well.
I think he's got more receiving yards than my quarterback has passing yards.
He has more receiving yards than the Warriors quarterback and top wide receiver combined. So yeah, it's really gonna come down to whether they have any way to stop that. And I mean, an aggressive defense is probably their best chance. You know, go all out for those interceptions and returns for touchdowns. And if you can get something going there, if you can score 7 points off of the roller barons trying to throw in touchdowns, then maybe you can just about do something there. Especially if you're playing, you know, your games on half the field for your offense, and they've got 80 yards to go, then maybe you can just about do enough. But you know, I think it's going to be difficult to look past the roller barons here.
Okay. Then moving on to the Empire. First game we've got to look at is the Grand Patriots at the Amethyst Russians. Nick.
Yeah, so we've been sort of following the Russians throughout the season. They've been up and down and round, so to speak. Patriots are in a tough division. They've got the High Hunters in their division. So it's interesting to see how this one panned out, and the Patriots really showed that they are a team to fear this season. Eight turnovers they caused the Russians. That's a lot of turnovers. Good passing offense, good rushing offense. Russians couldn't really get going. Throughout the season, they've been a team that have tried to put points on the board, and if you can't put points on the board, it's going to be a bit of a struggle for you. And the Patriots have shown early on in these playoffs their credentials and what they could potentially do this season.
Z?
I think you're going to struggle if you fumble the ball 7 times is part of the summary. But also, yeah, they just couldn't really get anything going, the poor Russians, in this one. I think the Patriots had them well marshaled.
In the immortal words of Bodiem, oh, those crazy Russians. But yeah, a nice balanced offense coming from the Patriots here. Turnover battle, massively winning that and progressing to the next round. And the next game we've got to look at is the Socal Rangers at the Pocahontas Thundering Herd, which means I believe we're guaranteed points.
Always.
And yes, we have a large number of points here. Nick?
Yeah, so as always, the Herd put on a good show every match, pretty much throughout the season. And this was one I really wanted to see whether the Herd could really, you know, get that first win. In the playoffs, they have been a little bit up and down the last few weeks, and I think they're a really fun team to watch. The fun part of this game, well, maybe not if you're a Herd fan. The fun part was when they fumbled the ball towards the end, and then the Rangers tried to get the ball down the other end, and they ended up a little bit short. I think it was 20 or 30 yards short, but so close to field goal range there. It's a good win for the Herd. It will give them a bit of confidence, and we'll have to see how they go, because they've won this game, and they've turned the ball over more than the Rangers. So if they can fix some leaks, maybe they've got enough for the playoffs.
Yeah, I've not watched the play-by-play on this one, but it does kind of look like what the Herd were doing is that they could move the ball in midfield via their passing game, but then when they got into the red zone, they had to lean on Crockett. And, you know, Crockett's theme has been punching in 4 touchdowns, not on very many big gains. He just ground it out in the red zone by the looks of things, you know, long of 9. But he's still got it done with his 15 carries, managed to almost, you know, a quarter of those were touchdowns.
I think the biggest thing I can see in this game is I'm very disappointed the herd destroyed the symmetry of the 7-7-7-7-7-7 with a 10.
Broke that scoreboard.
Oh, but yeah, it's a good game to see, and the Empire is definitely a uber competitive league this year.
Speaking of competitive, let's have a look at the next week's fixtures because they are mouth-watering.
So, start off with the Jacksonville High Hunters at the Spen Valley Tomahawks. Nick, what can you tell us about this, except for Postman Pat?
Well, I think this has got to be game of the week. Two very strong teams. We've seen the High Hunters a few times this season. They've looked very impressive. Tomahawks have gone through the season doing a lot of winning, 9-1.
Unfortunately, technical difficulties have. So right, Nick, you cut out there for a sec. Are you back?
Okay. So it'll be interesting to see whether the High Hunters offense of Pat and Legend can get going, because they've done some damage this season at various points. So obviously, early on we were told to watch Pat, and he didn't quite perform. So if you all go and watch Pat, he might not perform this week. But Legends carried on punching in the touchdowns and the yards throughout the season. Tomahawks do have home advantage and do have the best rusher in the league. Kimbrel also their top receiver. So yeah, it's going to come down to whether that the slightly different angles of attack from the High Hunters will make the difference between them and whether Kimbrel can get going against the High Hunters defense. I think this is going to be a really interesting game and a really great game to watch.
Z?
Yeah, I think in terms of the matchups that we've looked at in the divisionals outside the Atlantic, obviously because I play in the Atlantic, the Empire ones are the ones that I'd look forward to watching the most, and I would recommend to anyone if they're thinking of looking outside their league. I think this game and the other one we're going to look at will be top games. Interesting that, yeah, as Nick says, Kimbrel is a rusher and a receiver, so he gets it all done. And they've also got a defensive end with 25 sacks. So, yeah, what the High Hunters will need to watch out for that pass rush pressure.
Okay. Postman Pat is used to dealing with sacks, just not the sort that have him on the deck. And then the second game we have to look at is the Thundering Herd at the Armageddon Kings. I'm going to give up trying to pronounce their town. Nick, let's talk us through this doozy of guaranteed points. Okay, we have temporarily lost Nick, so Conrad, you and I look through this.
Yeah,
so
let's dive in there. I mean, the Kings have the number one defense, but equally well, the Herd, as we've talked about, are likely to score points. So I think even with the number one defense, they're probably still likely to score points. They're certainly not going to be sacking anyone on the Kings side, what with the fact that their best pass rusher only has 5 sacks this season. So you'll have to look elsewhere for where the key battles are going to be.
Yeah, and once again, I think it's very impressive that Coach Feely has made it to the playoffs in his first season as well. Nick, we've only just scratched the surface of this ding-dong battle. Would you care to give us your insights on this?
Yeah, so we haven't actually really looked at the Kings this season because their games have mostly been complete blowouts because they've just been that impressive. I think I want to say their one loss was to the High Hunters, which says a lot about the High Hunters as well. But the Kings have just dominated a lot of teams this season. The Herd, as we've mentioned before, they're very up and down, but there's always points. They're always in the game, and there's always a chance if you're scoring points and you're always in the game, there's always a chance you can win. So if they can create some chances to maybe turn the ball over and maybe stop this Kings offense somehow, then maybe they just about have enough. But the Kings have the number one best sacker in the league. that's going to be a problem for Colgate, and the Keane is going to be pretty keen to run up this herd defense. So yeah, it'd be an interesting one to watch. I fancy the Kings to win this one. As I say, they've looked good all season. I think I predicted the herd to lose last week. So, if I predict the Kings this week, Dean's going to be pretty pleased that he's in with a chance of winning.
Yeah, and I think the herd will still put at least 14 points on the board, absolute minimum, but I just can't see them winning it. I think that sooner or later they will stall out, and the Kings will not. They'll punish them by scoring points pretty much on every drive, and that will be the difference.
Okay, what does the points mark? What does the spread say? 28 points to the Kings. Okay,
you can
that's
see
a big spread.
They score a lot of points and win by a lot of points.
Yeah. Okay. Right, Nick, do you have any parting messages before we wrap up this week?
No, just good luck, and I think the playoffs, even if you're not involved in the playoffs, is a great time to go and check out some games from some other leagues. You've only got 4 matches to look at, and if you want to go try checking out another league or just seeing something different, maybe might give you some ideas of what to do next season. It's worth going and having a look at those other leagues and seeing what's going on elsewhere.
Z?
Yeah, no, totally agree with what Nick says, and that you can see some interesting things going on, even if you're not particularly fussed about, whether one team beats another team in another league. You can see some unconventional players doing things that you might not have encountered in your own league. The Atlantic is by and large quite traditionalist in terms of how people use QSTs, but as we've covered in many of these with players like Tripson or Vector or some of those sort of offbeat QST players are producing interesting things in other leagues, and it's worth taking a look to see. Yeah, as Nick mentioned, if you can get inspired for things you might be able to do in the future.
Okay, I wish good luck to all the teams playing in the playoffs this week, except for Conrad. And it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me too.